The G20 is the full movie, but today we got to see a trailer. Two important summits were held in Jakarta today. One was the India-ASEAN Summit, the other was the East Asia Summit. Prime Minister Modi attended both of these. He flew to Indonesia for a very quick trip, and I mean very quick. He departed New Delhi at around 8 p.m. yesterday. He was back home by 6:30 p.m. today. That's less than 24 hours. Now you may be wondering why. Why make a dash all the way to Jakarta just 24 hours before the G20 summit? After all, Joe Biden is not going. He did not go there. Neither did Xi Jinping. Well, Prime Minister Modi's statements in Jakarta give us an idea as to why he was there. These statements were pointed. They were unambiguous. And they signal a shift in policy. Let's begin with the East Asia Summit. It's a regional forum of Indo-Pacific countries. It started with 16 members in the year 2005. Later on, Russia and the US also joined. So what did Modi tell the East Asian leaders? Let me quote from what he said. The need of the hour is an Indo-Pacific where international law, including UNCLOS, is applicable to all countries. Where there is freedom of navigation and overflight, India believes that the Code of Conduct for South China Sea should be effective and in accordance with UNCLOS. Now, this statement is very important. The Prime Minister says conduct in the South China Sea should be based on UNCLOS. What is UNCLOS? The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS. Basically maritime rules, and UNCLOS is a touchy subject for China. In 2016, Chinese claims over South China Sea were rejected by an international court. That verdict was based on UNCLOS. Now, India has always supported these rules, but India's position on China's claims has evolved over the years. In 2016, when this verdict came out, New Delhi simply noted the verdict, no positive or negative reaction. But in June this year, 2023, that position changed. For the first time, India demanded that the 2016 verdict should be upheld. In other words, that China is wrong. What does this policy change mean? It means that India is becoming bolder in the South China Sea. Now to the second summit, the India-ASEAN Summit. This meeting was all about consolidating on recent progress. Last year, both sides elevated their ties. It is now a comprehensive strategic partnership. So where does it go next? Today, the Prime Minister said that the 21st century is Asia's century. He said ASEAN's vision is India's vision. Listen to this.
आसियान भारत की एक्ट ईस्ट पॉलिसी का केंद्रीय स्तंभ है। भारत आसियान सेंट्रलिटी और इंडो पैसिफिक पर आसियान के आउटलुक का पूर्ण समर्थन करता है। 21वीं सदी एशिया की सदी है, हम सबकी सदी है। इसके लिए आवश्यक है कि हम एक रूल्स बेस्ड पोस्ट कोविड वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर का निर्माण और मानव कल्याण के लिए सबका प्रयास।
Again, let's put these comments in context. Just yesterday, ASEAN leaders held another summit, ASEAN +3. The three being China, Japan and South Korea. Now, Xi Jinping did not even bother to attend it. So the Chinese premier took his place. And what did he tell ASEAN? Don't pick sides, oppose a Cold War. That's what the Chinese leader said. Listen to this.
To manage differences at present, it is very important to oppose picking sides, oppose bloc confrontation, and oppose a new Cold War. Disagreements and disputes among countries should be handled properly.
The difference is quite obvious. India says we support your views and outlook. China says don't pick sides. Just one problem though. That decision is not China's to make. ASEAN nations did try to balance between India and its rivals, between China and its rivals rather. In fact, they still do. But China's belligerence is forcing a rethink. As for the Cold War, China's memory seems a bit weak. The Cold War was not just about picking sides, it was also about big countries bullying smaller ones. So basically the same as China's current policy. From the looks of it, most countries have had enough of it. Just look at what happened last week. China released a new map. They claim territories belonging to India, the Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, Taiwan, and Japan. 3 of them are ASEAN nations. But the same China tells ASEAN, don't pick sides. All of these countries are joining hands because of China. Maybe the US wants to encircle and pin them down. But for neighbors, it's more existential. It's about protecting their land. And India too sees it that way. New Delhi is investing more political capital in the Indo-Pacific. In fact, there is talk of a new proposal now. The Quad leaders could be chief guests at India's next Republic Day, 2024. It's certainly possible. Next year is India's turn to host the annual Quad Summit. If the dates check out, then it could happen on or around Republic Day. We should have more clarity by the end of this week. Because all 4 Quad nations are also G20 members. Joe Biden will be in New Delhi. So will Anthony Albanese of Australia and Fumio Kishida of Japan. Chances are they will discuss Quad. All these events reveal India's current priorities. The Prime Minister's dash to Jakarta, his unconditional support to ASEAN, his mention of UNCLOS, and the idea of Quad on Republic Day. In the past years, there has been talk of India being non-committal in the Indo-Pacific, of New Delhi blowing hot and cold. Well, these events and statements could signal an end to that. Our next story is about American banks. They're known for their risk appetite. It caused them a lot of pain in the year 2008. That was during the financial crisis, 2008. A mountain of toxic loans came crashing down. It sent shockwaves across the global economy. The US government had to step in. They bailed out their banking industry. Earlier this year, US banks were in trouble again. We told you about what happened. There was a series of bank failures. Again, the impact was felt far and wide. And it seems American banks have not fully recovered from that. They remain a worried lot. They're holding on to massive amounts of cash. As of last month, they had over $3 trillion in reserves. So why are they stashing more cash? Well, this stockpile is like an insurance for them. Their economy is slowing down. Bank deposits are falling. In the month of May, for example, the US witnessed a record decline. There was an outflow of over $400 billion. $400 billion. Customers withdrew cash in very large numbers. This is the largest withdrawal since 1984. That's the year when record keeping began, 1984. Record keeping for bank deposits began that year. So this summer, we saw the biggest withdrawals ever. What's the reason behind this? The failure of US banks. Silicon Valley and Signature Bank. These were not the only 2 banks that failed this year, but we'll focus on these 2 because they caused the maximum damage. So why did these banks fail? Because they ran out of cash. The banks did not go bankrupt. There was a bank run. You see, any banking system runs on trust. In this case, there was a crisis of that trust or confidence. There were unprecedented withdrawals. Too many customers wanted to withdraw their money at the same time, so banks did not have that much ready cash. They had locked up their deposits in long-term investments, mostly in government bonds. Now, government bonds became very attractive, especially after the pandemic. The interest rates were high, so banks invested in them. They were hoping to fetch a higher return for their customers. A lot of money was put in these government bonds. In fact, this is the safest kind of investment. But in this case, the value of the government bonds had fallen. Banks could not unlock this money. And when people came asking for the cash, the banks did not have it. This is what led to their downfall. The other players in the banking sector took lessons from what happened. So now they're keeping more cash in hand. In case they face large withdrawals, they will not run out of money. At least that's the plan. But such moves are also telling. They help you understand the mind of American bankers, how they perceive their economic prospects. This move of hoarding cash is a reflection of the market sentiment, and it shows that there's uncertainty and caution in the US. I have one assessment from Moody's. This is a ratings agency, and Moody's predicts that there could be a recession in the US. In fact, I have a copy of their report. This is what they say. We continue to expect a mild recession in early 2024, and given the funding strains on the US banking sector, there will likely be a tightening of credit conditions and rising loan losses for US banks. What does that mean for banks? The situation will not improve in a hurry. More money could leave bank accounts, hence the need for a bigger cash pile. When people come asking for money, they should have that cash. They also face more risks, like the slump in the commercial real estate sector. Regional banks in America are particularly vulnerable to this. They lend a lot to builders. Do you know what's the total value of these loans? Over $3 trillion. And how good are these loans? Well, there is growing uncertainty now. Sales have taken a hit. In July, the volume of deals fell by 74%. It's the lowest level in 2 decades, 74% fall. Just 2 weeks ago, alarm bells started ringing. Debt worth $1.2 trillion is now at risk. They're being called troubled loans. Why? Because the loan values are high and prices of properties are falling. So there is a risk of default. Some landlords, in fact, are already facing trouble. The likes of Blackstone, Brookfield and Goldman Sachs, they pumped money in commercial property, but their investment turned bad. This year, these 3 investors have either defaulted on their debt or relinquished offices to their lenders. US regulators are keeping a close watch. They're bringing new rules. They're urging banks to fortify their financial foundations. New regulations are in the pipeline. One of them requires banks to boost their liquidity, meaning keep more cash in hand. So while there is no storm at the moment, dark clouds still loom over the US banking industry. Normalization. It was the buzzword of 2020. Israel has long been hated by its Arab neighbors, but it seems to have pulled off the impossible then. It normalized ties with 4 countries, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco and the Sudan. The deal changed the face of West Asia. But 3 years have passed since the Abraham Accords, and now Israel wants something bigger. A normalization deal with Saudi Arabia. That's what they want. Time for some context. Saudi Arabia is the leader of the Muslim world. It does not recognize Israel. It has refused to do so since 1948. That's the year when Israel became an independent state, 1948. So a deal now between Israel and Saudi Arabia would be historic. It would be the deal of the century. Then what's stopping Riyadh? Palestine. The biggest bone of contention here. When Arab nations normalized ties in 2020, Palestine had called it a stab in the back. But they did little beyond condemning it. This time, however, they have a different plan. On Tuesday, 3 senior Palestinian envoys flew to Riyadh. They met the Saudi National Security Advisor. They had a list with them, a list of demands that Saudi Arabia could make on their behalf, on Palestine's behalf. Demands in exchange for normalizing ties with Israel. So what exactly are these Palestinian demands? Well, I have the list with me. Number 1, transfer the West Bank to Palestinian control. There are some parts in Israeli control. Palestine wants them back. Number 2, no more Israeli settlements in the West Bank. Number 3, more money from Saudi Arabia to Palestine. They're asking for some $200 million every year. Number 4, reopen the US consulate in Jerusalem. This used to be their diplomatic mission to Palestine, but Donald Trump shut it in the year 2018. And number 5, resume US brokered talks between Israel and Palestine, basically resume the peace talks. These are the 5 demands from Palestine, and this is their best chance to get them. Interestingly, one key demand is missing. They're not asking for statehood. Let me repeat that. Palestinian leaders are not asking for a separate state. Clearly, they're being realistic. They know that Riyadh has the appetite to offer concessions. Saudi Arabia is the de facto leader of the Arab world. It has always backed Palestine. Its leadership is sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. Its public is opposed to Israel. In a situation like this, any deal with Israel must come with concessions for Palestine, and Palestine knows all of this. So they've changed their strategy. Since April, the 2 sides have been talking. That same month, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas visited Jeddah. In August, Riyadh appointed its ambassador to Palestine, this man, Naif al-Sudairi. So clearly, things are moving fast. Publicly, Palestine is saying different things. They say they will settle for nothing less than a state. But privately, the negotiations are a little different. Palestine's actual demands are more modest and honestly, a little more achievable. But even then, some of these demands are overtly ambitious, like Israel conceding West Bank territories. It's not going to happen. Israel's current government is the most right-wing government in the country's history. There is no way they would agree to giving up territory. Any Israeli concession to Palestine will be a red line, and Israel's right-wing parties will boycott the deal. As for Prime Minister Netanyahu, he has already brushed aside Palestinian concessions. Netanyahu called it a mere checkbox exercise. Those were the words he used, checkbox exercise. Does that mean that Palestine will lose out again? Well, probably. But these demands show that they have come a long way. If they ask for too less, they risk a backlash. If they ask for too much, they will get nothing. And alienating two of their biggest allies, the US and Saudi Arabia, is not an option. So the Palestinians are treading carefully. Plus, it's a deal with Saudi Arabia we're talking about. The normalization may be a pet project for Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, but he will not implement it by risking public sentiment. This is a Crown Prince who has focused on what's best for his kingdom, for Saudi Arabia. This is a Saudi leadership that is hyper-focused on its national interests. If they don't get concessions from Israel, they would demand security concessions from the US. Biden may have to agree to major security concessions to make the deal worth it for the Saudi kingdom. So the question is, which side will offer how much? What will it take for MBS to stand and shake hands with Benjamin Netanyahu? And will Palestine end up being the loser once again? We'll be tracking this closely to bring you the answers. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Climate protests seem to be getting more and more extreme, like this one. Protesters hit the boss of Ryanair with cakes. This was just ahead of his press briefing outside the European Commission. In Ukraine, it's mock diplomacy for Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba and US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. The two were seen sharing fries and a pie at McDonald's. In the United States, a prisoner was seen crab walking out of jail, and Qatar seems to have taken bird's eye view, quite literally, after it strapped a camera on a falcon. The result was a magnificent view of the country. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1996, American rapper Tupac Shakur was shot by unknown assailants in his car in Las Vegas. 6 days later, he died of his injuries at the age of 25. Tupac was one of the biggest hip-hop stars of his time. Even after 3 decades, no one really knows who killed him. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Great person. People gonna be surprised, and I got to kiss her, and ain't nothing wrong with that. And it's all good.
Bonjour.
Welcome in Belgium! Stop the pollution of the fucking place!
We've crossed 2 million subscribers on YouTube. This is arguably the fastest growing news platform, and we can't thank you enough for fueling this growth. All those of you who join us every day to watch this show and more, thank you. We launched Vantage 7 months ago, and these have been some very rewarding 7 months for us. So from the entire team here, heartfelt gratitude.